show where I, Alexei, talk to cool and funny, interesting people about their favorite freaking movies. And we're doing something a little bit different today here in the back room of the Last Video Store. We're going to be going through putting together a list of underappreciated, great Australian horror films. And joining me today to do so is horror filmmaker Kane Senes.
Howdy.
Thank you for coming in, brother.
Thanks for having me, man. This is awesome.
I'm so glad we could do this.
Yes, this is really cool. I love the show. I love the pod. Avid listener, so it's kind of like a thrill to be here.
Well, it's a thrill to have you here. And there will be more thrills and spills of blood on this episode coming.
Yes.
But I really wanted to get you in to do this because I think like people really appreciate Australian horror, especially this new wave of Australian horror. And I think you've made one of the best films in this new wave of Australian horror. You made this great film. I've got a copy of the new Blu-ray here, Sissy. You can watch it on Shudder or rent it from the Last Video Store. Come on in and pick it up.
If you have a Region A Blu-ray player, you can watch that one.
You can buy this new Blu-ray. It's from Vinegar Syndrome. But I love this movie. I remember hosting screenings with you and your creative collaborator, Hannah Barlow.
Yes, who says hello, sends her love. She's sorry she couldn't make it.
We're bummed out.
I know.
Could have been the trio here on the podcast today.
I know. There probably wouldn't have been enough mics to go around.
But I hosted screenings of it back when it premiered in Australia a couple of years ago. It also stars Last Video Store alum Aisha D.
That's right. Yeah.
But people who haven't seen this film, how would you describe it to them?
I mean, it always gets grouped in the horror category. We always thought of it as a comedy. But you know, there's a thin line between them. So I talk about it. If you want to talk genres, I talk about it like a horror comedy, horror satire. But it's also just it's a character piece about a social media influencer, dare I say the dirty word, who well, I don't think we realized when we were making it that like we were about to kind of release a film as a lot of other people release social media horror films. That was not intentional. There was definitely a zeitgeist going on, but yeah, I would say it's about a lonely girl who reconnects with a long-lost friend from high school and gets invited away to her hen's weekend or her bachelorette weekend for our American listeners, and runs into her high school bully, which triggers her, and some mayhem ensues.
That's so perfectly put. I love that you could talk about it being a comedy as well, because it's one of those great like horror comedies where the relief of tension comes from both ends of horror and comedy. But the thing I really love about this movie, you've got fucking excellent gore in it.
Yeah.
And also incredible performance by Aisha D at the top.
Yeah.
Just great performance. Very clever film. But I kind of wanted to talk to you about it before we kind of kick into this list of it being an Australian horror film. Because I think that it falls uniquely in its sense of being Australian, because it could really happen anywhere. Did you have pressures to not make it in Australia, or what was your reasoning of going, this should be an Australian set film as well?
Well, I mean, when Hannah and I were writing it, we kind of were just writing it off the map. So we weren't developing it with a producer. Like there wasn't any pressure in that sense at first, but it was us as writers, as Australian filmmakers going, it's so hard to make a film here and get it out, to actually kind of, you know, try and ensure that it has a life internationally. Even though obviously, you know, Australian films historically are amazing. But you think back, there might be like that one or two a decade that make it out. I mean, there's a lot more now, and so we just felt like, you know, should we be setting this in America, shooting it in Australia? You know, it's kind of like a nondescript landscape. Most of it takes place in this house. Could we get away with that? And would that kind of give the film
more legs,
longer legs without Nick Cage? But we just kind of felt like, so we rewatched Get Out, and there's a scene in Get Out where they hit the deer on the way to the house. And we originally had written that they hit a deer. And we were like, it should just be a kangaroo. They should just hit a kangaroo. And there was something in that iconography, I think, that just made us go like, this is where we want to go with it. Let's stop trying to kind of make it something that it's not. We actually, Hannah and I met living in Los Angeles. So I had made my first film there before meeting her, Echoes of War, this Western, which was kind of like my first low budget feature out of film school. And then Hannah and I met in Los Angeles and we made a film called For Now together, which was the complete opposite thing. It was a mumblecore movie. And then we just kind of said like, we want to write a horror film or we want to write something in the genre space.
Yeah.
Okay. And we just thought, let's go back to Australia. Like, what are we doing here? Like, let's go back to Australia. We're struggling to stay afloat here in the States. We can, access Screen Australia and funding bodies back home. And let's have that experience. Let's make an Australian film. And so that impetus, I think, is just what carried us through. And we just kind of knuckled down on that. And, we spoke a lot about Muriel's Wedding, which is not what you would call a horror film. I think if Hannah was here, she'd probably say it's her favorite horror film.
Yeah.
It's a horror.
Well, it is emotional horror.
It's a social horror.
Yeah.
And we were looking at that and we were like, if we just made a film like that, but we didn't kind of restrict ourselves in terms of like how far the satire goes, right? Like you're angry at your friend, but you're literally bashing their head in, right? And it just spilt out like that. And so I think when we were finished with the script, we were looking at it and we were going, it being Australian is its point of difference. And that's just that's the angle I think that we took from that point on. And I mean, even like with the casting of Aisha, like she's Australian, but she'd been working in the States for the majority of her career, right? And so like she had to practice to get her Australian accent back because it was so like Americanized. So it was kind of like all of us just going back home to actually kind of reconnect with our own roots, I think.
Well, I think it does such a fabulous job of that, especially like when I think about it being about like social media and social media influencers. It has a great Australian angle to it because I think, now we're seeing so much more of that coming through in Australian culture and like how prominent social media influence is like in every aspect of life. So I think it's like a bit of a prescient movie in that regard as well. I love what you talked about with Australian genre films in that regard because they do cross a lot of genre. Yeah. I think when we're putting this list together, we're going to be seeing a lot of like genre cost contamination, a few things. Are they a horror movie? Aren't they a horror movie? Yeah. But I think that's all the stuff of like what we explore in Australian horror because I do think there's like a unique identity to Australian horror. A lot of it is in reflection to nature and in reflection to land, in reflection to cultures and different cultures as they live and grow in Australia. So I think it's going to be quite an interesting list. And we're going to be kind of looking at horrors by decades, building up to the current new wave, like shining a light on maybe some underappreciated favorites, some films that we are essentially recommending you. Usually it's me recommending movies to the guest, but it's me and you together recommending to freaking everybody listening and watching this episode right now.
Well, I just want to add, in my world, in my family, with my friends, I'm the kind of guy that people ask for movie recommendations, okay? I have never met anyone that I think has seen as many movies as you. Every time I log something on Letterboxd, I'm seeing that you've been there at least once or twice. So this, I feel like a sense of pressure.
No, there's no pressure.
To live up to the great Alexei Toliopoulos' movie knowledge.
Wow, I would say I think of you as the same guy because there's so many times where I go see like a retrospective movie. I've been dying to see this movie forever, and it's finally playing this little cinema. You're always there. You and Hannah are always there. So we always hang out and chat after it.
That's
so
true.
I think this is this would be a good list from both of us to the world.
Sure.
We're doing a fucking service here right now.
Yeah.
A service
Absolutely.
to the world.
Yeah. Thank us later.
No, thank us fucking now. Thank us now. I want to thank you right now.
Weekly.
We're going to start in the 1970s where the true new wave of Australian cinema does start.
Yeah.
Where, I would even say I'm consider myself somewhat of not an expert, but an appreciator of Australian film.
Yeah.
And I almost find it impossible to list films that happened before the 70s.
Yeah.
Like there's like, a dozen that I know about.
Oh, I mean, there's some great films, but it wasn't, I think horror films, if I'm not mistaken, were banned until 68. Like there was only so much you could show on screen, right? So it wasn't really until the beginning of the 70s that we and that's why we had the Australian New Wave. Mm-hmm. I think it's because there were a lot of filmmakers who finally were like, yes, we get to dabble in genre.
Yeah.
Right. We get to do like what our favorite filmmakers in the States and like in Europe have been doing for a long time now. And so that I think is what causes this great explosion of films. And I have lots from the 70s. I've kind of done it where I've only picked like top 4. I've picked one from each decade.
Beautiful.
70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s.
As have I. We're going to do top 8.
Okay.
We're going to do one each from each decade. Okay. And we're going to start with the 70s. I'm going to kick it off to you because you've got a beautiful film.
Well, yeah, I mean...
Newly restored in this beautiful 4K. Seeing it with fresh eyes. I'd say for people around our age, this is kind of like an essential discovery film.
And probably, I know it's a big call, but probably my favorite Australian film of all time.
Mm-hmm.
And that is 1971's Wake in Fright.
Horror.
By Canadian director Ted Kotcheff, famous filmmaker behind the first Rambo movie, First Blood,
And also Weekend at Bernie's.
and Weekend at Bernie's. Let's not forget. There's some crossover here, right? Wake in Fright is like the combination of Weekend
really
at Bernie's and First Blood.
It really is.
Especially with what he goes through in this film. But it's kind of, considered the film, I guess, that kick-started Australian horror.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because it's not really a horror film. There's no, spoilers if you haven't seen it, there's no real villain, so to speak. There's no necessarily, this is another thing we're going to have to talk about, right? Is like different kinds of horror, right? Obviously ghost stories, serial killer movies. This, like the great horror in Wake in Fright is just Australian drinking culture. And I guess you could say now the term we would use is toxic masculinity. But even the guys in this film who take, is it Jim Grant? Tom Grant? Something Grant.
Yeah.
Grant.
We'll call him Grant.
Grant's newfound friend. So Grant's an English guy who's kind of teaching in the outback. And he wants to get back to Sydney. And he basically loses all his money playing 2-Up, right? Arguably Australia's most famous gambling game.
Our gaming export,
I had some American friends who came out for my wedding a couple of years ago, and on Australia Day, we took them to play some 2-Up at a pub, and they were just they were like, how cool is this? They were like, they got to flick the 2 coins, and all I kept thinking about was Wake in Fright, right? And so it's just such a perfect embodiment of a lot of those things that we think about when we think about Australian masculinity, Australian men. Famous for this kangaroo hunting scene in which the filmmakers went along with a real kangaroo hunt. I don't even think that sequence gets included in a film today. Obviously kangaroo hunts still go on, but it's pretty disturbing. So it's a film that it was a big entry point for me just into filmmaking in general. I think I discovered it when I was at film school, and I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the way it was shot, with the energy behind the cinematography, just the descent into madness. And I think, when you look at Sissy, for example, we wanted to make a descent into madness film, right? I think ultimately, if I had to pick, that is my favorite kind of horror film, right? A single character, mostly shot through their point of view. And over the course of the film, they just get driven insane, right? And the horror comes from that experience. And so the film is kind of trying to put you in the lead character's head. And I think that's where I first experienced that. And so for me, is it the Australian film I come back to the most? Not necessarily. Is it? If it's a Friday night, and it's not something I just want to necessarily throw on all the time because it's a pretty heavy movie. Yeah. But if I was to show some film students, if I was to work with a cinematographer in the future, I would be like, check out Wake in Fright, because there's just something so endemic in it to my understanding of film, I think.
I think you're spot on. And I think why I would fully consider it a horror film, it goes beyond horror, of course, because it's a prestigious film as well. But I think what really makes it horror is, as you put it, the descent into madness. The descent into madness is so raw, so over the top. It's almost it's exaggerated. Yeah. And I think because it has that exaggeration, it goes into that genre space. Yeah. But also it's real and raw. It captures all of that kind of that pure terror of being out of your comfort zone, being out of any kind of comfort, really.
And it's dirty, it's filthy,
really dirty.
It's sweaty. It really is an outback movie,
Yeah. And that kind of roo shooting sequence, it's so surreally shot. Yeah. It's genuinely horrifying. That feels like a horror sequence that could fit into any classic horror film. Yeah. The other thing I'd say is the presence of Donald Pleasence.
I was about to say pre-Halloween.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Pre-Halloween, great performance. But he captures so much great fear in that. when he plays off against the John Grant character.
John Grant?
Played
John
by
Grant.
Gary Bond.
I said Jim and I said Tom. Let's just combine them and
It's
make John.
We'll just morph it so it becomes the same thing. But the thing that I love about Wake in Fright is I've seen the movie many times. It was long lost for a long time.
Yeah.
And then, around the time where you and I would have been young people, it was rediscovered.
It
and
was
put
found
back out.
It was found in a dumpster about to be thrown out.
It was about
And
to be incinerated, I think.
someone found the last remaining print. And then it got restored and screened at the only Australian film to screen at Cannes twice.
Yeah.
Originally when it came out and then when it was rediscovered.
Yeah, very, very rare thing. I think Love and Tour is one of the only other films that screened twice.
Oh, that did it
and
too?
now I think Dogma.
Dogma, right.
I think Dogma, the Kevin Smith one, I think.
Oh, the Kevin Smith one?
I
of
think
course.
It might be in there.
For some reason in my head, I'm like, he's talking about Lars von Trier's Dogville. And then I'm like, no, wait, Dogma.
I think it's Dogma.
I love Kevin Smith. I'm not a huge Dogma fan.
Oh, really?
It's not top 4 for me.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, he's got a lot of good movies.
I got to go back to it now, though.
Give it a shot.
He's back.
There's
back
a new
in the
4K of it, and there's also a new 4K restoration of Wake in Fright. It's been screening again. I caught it last year at Melbourne International Film Festival. Looks so different because it's like it has a new emphasis on like other colors outside of orange.
Oh, interesting.
And I think that works really beautifully. I think it never looks better in my opinion.
Yeah.
But also what I rediscover every time coming back to Wake in Fright, there's something new. It's one of those really rich texts where you can have a new reading of it, new something every time you come back, a new discovery. Absolutely love Wake in Fright. Perfect film to kick off the list. And number one spot, put it in the number one spot. Yeah, okay. My film from the 1970s I'm going to put on our list is from 1978, directed by Colin Eggleston, with a screenplay by someone who might come up a few times during this discussion, Everett DeRoche. This is the movie Long Weekend.
Great flick.
Horror.
And I'm going to read a tagline to this film as a way to kick things off. Their crime was against nature. Nature found them guilty. Great tagline. But Long Weekend, if you haven't seen it, it's about this suburban couple that go away for a long weekend into not really the outback, it's more a beach film. This is an example of like a kind of beachy nature,
like a coastal town, well, not town, but like an area,
coastal bush.
Yes.
But it's like these two people in a couple that go camping for a weekend, and I really want to pick this because it's a great example of creature horror, but not like Jaws, where it's a single creature going after them. It more becomes a revenge film of nature against man. And I think so many great films in the horror genre in Australia are about usually white people's relationship to the land and how their land cannot take them. And I think Wake in Fright can be read that way. So many films can be read that way. But this one is the reason I chose it is because it's such an obvious example of all these things. Like it's so clean, this movie. In especially another sense is one of the things I really look at with horror, and I think horror is the genre of transgression. And transgression is so important to the genre and to horror storytelling, not just like films that are like so taboo, you can't believe what they're doing in this film. This film is not that kind of transgression. I think about transgression as essential to horror because usually the characters that you're following do something that goes against, whether it be nature, whether it be science, whether it be religion, they commit a taboo. And then the whole film is their comeuppance for committing it.
Right.
They make that choice. And I think there's never been a better, cleverer, cleaner, and funnier example of like transgression, because the movie begins with them going out to the bush and all they do is transgress. They're littering. They run over a kangaroo.
It's just comical what arseholes they are.
It is. It's so exaggerated, like how much crap they do. They kill a dugong. They break an eagle's egg. And it's all this thing that just comes over and over again, like how much they're transgressing.
Yeah.
And then it becomes this, I'd say like an environmental horror film where nature strikes back. Eco horror, like it's a great early example of eco horror.
Yeah, which has become its own subgenre, especially as it's the environment has become a bigger talking point, right?
As we face our own eco horrors in the world.
But they were doing it back in the 70s, which makes you go, shit, we should have been listening a long fucking time ago.
I just think this it's such a great clean description of how that works. It's one that I would recommend to like film students as well, to just go, hey, this is what transgression is horror in horror is. It can be as simple as this shit. And then you can see these people get get tortured.
Well, and to your point about like what horror can achieve, like, I mean, you watch the film and it almost gets to like ridiculous proportions of like now suddenly we're in the birds, right? And it's just like there's some bird is swooping down, like every single thing is attacking them, right? But what I love about it is that it implies that maybe it's nature, but there is some supernatural force at play here.
It's something more exaggerated, something bigger.
How's the dugong keep appearing like that, right? Like that's not nature as we know it.
Yeah,
right?
It's nature as force.
Exactly. So you're watching it going, this is just coincidence. Like there's no way all these things could keep happening to these people. But I do think what horror allows you to do, and this is a great example of that, is that you can take an idea or concept and you can push it to the nth degree. Because it's not about what would happen in real life. It's about like, what is this trying to say to me? What is this film about? And so for people who don't watch a lot of horror and they just think it's just there to scare, a lot of these films we're talking about aren't that scary.
Yeah.
But the themes and the commentary, the thematic statements that they're concerned with are disturbing and horrific, right? And Long Weekend, I think, is a great example of that because it really pushes what eco horror can be. Like it literally tackles every single kind of animal attack you can think of in this one movie. But what's interesting is that they don't do any of the obvious ones. There's no snake attack. There's no big spider attack, right? Like you might see a shot of one of those, but they intentionally try to get every animal that you don't think of when you think of the big bad scary Australian outback. Like we don't think of dugongs, right?
No.
Right?
But now you do.
Now
after
you
seeing
do.
Long Weekends.
And that I think was the smartest thing that they did.
And I think Everett DeRoche has talked about how he felt like he didn't nail the screenplay because you don't feel enough like you feel sympathy for the creatures, but you don't feel enough for the humans being in the thing because he sets the transgression so high.
Yeah.
No, that's the beauty of the film to me. It's just about torture. You're seeing these people get tortured. It makes it more fun out there horror experience.
Well, you're kind of rooting for nature.
Exactly. It puts you against your own odds. You turn against humanity and go for nature.
We're not going to mention the remake.
I've never seen the remake.
I've never seen it either.
It's with Jim Caviezel and Claudia Carvin.
Jim Caviezel's in it?
Caviezel.
I love Jim Caviezel.
Of course, he's Christ himself.
One of my favorite roles is him in The Thin Red Line.
Great performance.
One of my favorite characters ever.
And Claudia Carvin, one of my favorite actors.
Claudia, yeah.
I've never seen it. Have you seen it?
No, I think 2008, I want to say.
So.
Like around there. I've had friends say don't bother, but I don't like to, like, for me, there's something to take away from every film. And what I've heard is that it's really is almost like a shot-for-shot remake, which I'm interested in seeing. Like, is that a good approach to a remake? Probably not. Like, you probably want to add something to the point of making the film. Otherwise, why do it? Like, it's already been done. But I kind of want to see what a 2000s version of that exact same movie
it recontextualizes that.
It's like he throws the can out the window the exact same way. There's just no new creativity.
I think it is based on the same screenplay because I know Everett DeRoche is the credited screenplay writer, so it might be the same screenplay. Unless he went back and goes, okay, let's give the humans a bit more of a chance at that.
They probably felt they couldn't rewrite Everett DeRoche. It's like sacrilege. Although I do think there's something else you could do with that concept. But I think you would have to kind of it can't just be the exact same beats to that story.
I reckon you and I have to watch it in the next few weeks.
I think we should have an addendum to this podcast.
I think we have to add it at the end. But let's head into the 1980s. Another fervent time for Australian film, probably the center point of the Ozploitation movement. What is your pick from the 80s?
So my pick from the 80s is a film from 1982 called Next of Kin by Tony Williams.
Horror.
In really the only narrative feature that he ever made. I think he went on to do a couple documentaries after. I got turned on to this film listening to Quentin Tarantino talk about it, because it was long kind of his favorite Australian film. I was like, well, shit, I got to give that a watch. And I can totally see why. And I don't want, like, are we doing spoilers on this?
Maybe we'll kind of, I think because we're trying to introduce people, so we'll skirt around them. But
I'll skirt around it.
Maybe give like a little bit of a plot synopsis, because this is a film that I'd say is not, even to a lot of cinephiles, not very well known.
Yeah. And it really should be, because I remember the first time I watched it, I just got so surprised by it because I thought I was watching a certain kind of film and then it switched. and that's all I'll say. So what I will say is that it's about a young woman whose mother passes away and leaves her this estate in the countryside, which is kind of being used as a nursing home for the elderly. And so she goes out there to take over the property to kind of work with the team there who are operating this nursing home. And strange going-ons just start occurring, right? Kind of bumps in the night and things in this old manor. But it just goes some really unexpected places. And it's just so beautifully shot. And the score, I think, is really hypnotic and just kind of like you can't quite put your finger on it. It doesn't sound like any other movie.
It's kind of like a synthy score by Klaus Schulze.
That's right, Klaus Schulze.
Yeah, Klaus Schulze. He's done a few other scores, but he's like an experimental musician from Germany. He's been in like kind of not all the stuff that I know about, but like synthy kind of keyboard bands and stuff that people in that know would know.
He did the score for Angst, the 1980s film. But yeah, look, I just think it's a really cool kind of hidden pick. It's got well, the lead of the film is I didn't actually recognize her at the time. I had to look her up. Jackie Kerin. But obviously, John Jarratt, mainstay. He's going to be in a lot of these films that we talk about, and a lot that we don't. But obviously, to a more modern audience, Mick Taylor in the Wolf Creek films, which is interesting because that was kind of like I saw John Jarratt in Wolf Creek before I kind of realized he had done all these other movies, right? And so as I got older, I kind of went back and realized like he was actually. He kind of played like the nice guy from it. Like he was actually Australia's sweetheart. He's the hero. Yeah. And so it kind of like watching him in this helped, I think, retransform my understanding that John Jarratt is not just the most sadistic killer in Australian film history. But he's actually quite, and having watched the films in that reverse order, having seen Wolf Creek first, I was I didn't trust him in the movie, which is interesting because I think an audience getting to know John Jarratt from kind of like Dark Age onwards through this would have had a very different relationship with him. So I just kind of enjoyed seeing him in this movie. And I don't know what happened to Tony Williams. I was trying to look it up and see why he didn't make another narrative film. I just think it's amazing. And I think is it another Everett DeRoche script?
Let me double check. I think it might be because it's of that era.
No, sorry, Michael Heath. I might be confusing with something else. And Tony Williams. So Tony also was a writer on this, which makes it even more confounding that we kind of never saw another film from him. I just think it's great. I really do think it's one of the. It's kind of like there's the Australian. So this is another thing that I was thinking about, right? There's the Australian horror films that you look at them, and we're going to talk about some where you go, these could only be made in Australia. Yeah. And then there's those that could be Hollywood films. Yeah. They could be made anywhere. And this is kind of a little more like one of those.
Yes.
You don't like if you remake this film shot for shot in the American accent, it still works. Yeah. But it doesn't diminish, I think, what it means for me as an Australian film, because I think it shows that we can compete in just that, universal, broad, crowd-pleasing horror kind of way, right? Like we can make genre films with the best of them, and they don't have to rely on the eccentricities. They don't have to be Wake and Frights. They don't have to have that Australiana angle in order for them to be great movies.
And I think with this one, I hadn't seen this before until leading up to this list, and you said, I'm going to put this one on here. You should watch it. I adored this film.
Yeah.
I think it's so beautifully made. It's so dreamy, and the way that there's something in this I can't quite articulate that I've never seen before, and I think is worthy of study in this film, which is the way that there are a few scares that are presented as if they were jump scares.
Yeah.
Where a short burst of something happens, and there's just an element missing. Maybe it's a cut back to and from.
Yeah.
I don't really know what it is, but there's something missing these jump scares where they don't work like a jump scare. Well, so there's no relief of tension.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean. It's like they just play through the moment.
Yeah,
like there's they don't have the violin strike right there. They might even,
or sometimes there is a strike, but then there's something else missing.
Or suddenly goes into like slow motion, or it's got an eerie score underneath it that doesn't spike, or that does spike, but then like you said, just keeps playing. It's weird. It's it's been compared a bit. It's kind of been called like the Australian The Shining.
Yeah, definitely
And
feels like that.
I get that. It's like those are unique films where you kind of can't really think of other films that have that tone.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just as much about the tone of the film.
Mm.
It's not really a film. I think about the script.
No.
I think about the approach to the filmmaking.
It's a visual journey as well.
Totally.
And I think, but there's something in that, like those jump scares that aren't jump scares that leave you feeling so uneasy.
Yeah.
They don't relieve you the way that jump scare does. Like, it's not the spike for you. You just go, oh, that's freaking me out.
Well,
It's
because that's
so
what we're
cool.
used to. And then when you see something where and so, you know, like this film's what, 1982. So, God, I have awful maths, but it's like 40 something years old, and you can watch it today and still feel arguably more uneasy than modern horror because it's not giving you that thing that you're used to.
And it's exactly right. Right. Why I think people should study this film. Chilling, and also, not to spoil it too much, but it has the most thrilling finale maybe of any Australian genre picture I've ever seen.
I think it might be my favorite actor of any Australian film.
It just has this slow build up for an hour. Then the last half hour or so is just phenomenal, ripper, psycho stuff.
Absolutely.
But the final moments, they capture something so wild. And apparently it's because there was like a false timing. There was a false timing with that when they were trying to strike something. I'll say. I don't want to say too much about that because you don't want to give away. But apparently that it was like a false timing thing. So they caught. Oh God, I don't want to say too much. I'm so but
you'll know when you see it. And maybe my favorite single cut, like my favorite edit in any Australian film. Yeah. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. This is such a great film. Next of Kin. Absolutely adore it, from 1982. I'm going to stick for the 1980s as well. Early 80s, 1981. Another screenplay by Everett DeRoche, but directed by Richard Franklin, who's one of my favorite Australian filmmakers. It is Road Games from 1981.
Horror.
Another one kind of like Waking Friday go, is this horror, is this not? But I think it harkens back to an earlier era of horror, which is Alfred Hitchcock films. And this, of course, is Richard Franklin is like the true acolyte to Hitchcockian style and the Hitchcockian thriller. And this is his imagining or reimagining of Rear Window. And when he and Everett DeRoche were making another film that could have been on this list, Patrick, which is also, I would say, his version of Psycho.
Yeah, true.
Before he makes Psycho
and Carrie.
2.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And he's when they're kind of pulling that film together, he gave Everett DeRoche the screenplay to Rear Window, saying, I want you to make the screenplay look like this.
Right.
And Everett DeRoche became obsessed with Rear Window.
Right.
And so he was like, I want to make a film that is like this movie.
Just on the road.
Just on the road.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Road Games really is. It really is such a beautiful translation of Rear Window, but on the road. And it's not just like the intrigue of Rear Window that I think most of the copies of Rear Window take on, which is the thrilling plot of that intrigue of witnessing a murder or thinking you've witnessed a murder and trying to uncover it, or becoming obsessed with falling down and tumbling down that rabbit hole. They're usually quite clean-cut films. This takes on board so many of the other brilliant touches of Rear Window, which is those voyeuristic touches where Jimmy Stewart's looking out the window and he's seeing the everyday lives of all his neighbors, the people that make up his neighborhood and the backlot of his apartment building. What Everett DeRoche and Richard Franklin do here is they take that and they transport it to the road of the Nullarbor Plains on a truck. It's Rear Window, but rear view mirror or something, if you want to say something like that. Windshield window.
Rear window overdrive.
And it's Stacey Keach as he's driving down these plains. And it captures this thing that I think is so key to Australian life, and why I think this is such a great Australian movie, and why I think it's uniquely Australian as well, which is those kind of summer holiday feelings where you're driving down the road for hundreds and hundreds of kilometers. Maybe it's a family holiday, and you're looking out and there's all these familiar people that you see are on similar, if not the same journey as you. Yeah. And you start to have form these stories with them, these kind of voyeuristic stories, these familiar strangers that become part of your life for a weekend or something. And it captures those moments as well, where he's like narrating the lives of these people around him as he is driving and becoming more obsessed with this killer that he thinks he's following or think he's tracking down.
Would you call Rear Window a horror, or would you call it a thriller?
I'd call it a thriller.
Would you call this a horror?
I think I'd call this a horror. It's like a horror thriller.
Yeah.
Rear Window I wouldn't say is a horror thriller, but I'd say this is a horror thriller. And I think what makes it a horror thriller is you feel more danger for the characters. Yeah. And I think it's the exaggeration of the killer instead of just being, this guy's committed a murder in Rear Window. Or maybe he has, maybe he hasn't. There's so much danger to it because it feels like a serial killer.
And you kind of know from the beginning that there's that, like, it's not like in Rear Window where we're not quite sure, and then by the time that the danger element is really only in that final bit of the film. This, like, I mean, I would say it is more a horror road games. I mean, if you think about it, it's like they see the killer burying something on the side of the road. There's literally a scene when they're in the back of the truck with cow carcasses like hanging there, right? That classic horror idea of like walking through the cold room with all the carcasses dangling. It's got a lot of that horror.
It's nasty.
They're parked they're parked overnight at that little campsite. You know, they go over the hill and like the killer's there and he's watching, right? Like there are so many of those moments. There's obviously that great scene where Stacy Keach goes looking for Jamie Lee Curtis, which we should also talk about the fact like two American leads.
Exactly.
But where he all set at night and we're out in the outback at night with the lights off. Yeah. You know, like there's something there's so much more threat there from different angles. It's not just this guy who's walking from that apartment to my apartment.
Yes.
It can come from anywhere and we don't know where the guy is.
And I think as well, I'm going to use the same wake and fright rule. You got a Halloween alumni in
That's
here.
True.
So it becomes a horror movie.
It counts.
Yeah. But I think as well, it captures more of those carnal instincts, those exploitational instincts of horror cinema that is not present in a thriller. Like there is, like, you know, it's the over-exaggeration or the fear of actually showing you mucked up stuff. Like you're seeing murders and stuff happen. Yes. I think in a thriller, it's like plays a bit more coy with it. Here is pure exploitation.
You're watching a little more through your fingers with this one. I mean, I'm not because I've seen a lot of fucked up stuff, but someone else might. Yeah. But also like it's got a gloved killer. Like it's got that like giallo kind of element, right?
Yes.
Like it's literally got the black gloved killer. So it's drawing on horror elements quite willingly and just kind of like throwing them all in. Like it feels like it's not afraid to just like throw everything but the kitchen sink in it, you know?
And I believe there is a kitchen sink in this movie. There is a kitchen sink being thrown in this film.
There's a lot of weird things on wheels.
Yes,
it should be called Rear Windshield.
Yes, I think let's call it that from now on. It's also a huge influence on Quentin Tarantino, one of his favorite Australian horror films. Clearly in Death Proof, you can see kind of like a little bit of acknowledgement to this film, but more so on Greg McLean's Wolf Creek. Apparently, that was a major influence for his film. Okay. And that killer, that gloved killer, is played by the legendary Australian stuntman Grant Page. Yeah. One of my heroes. Lost him in the last couple of years, so salute him always.
Stunt rock.
We're going to the 1990s now.
Oh, well, I think I know what I have for the 90s.
Yeah, let's hear it straight away, Kane. I actually can't remember what you've chosen. So
this is so silly. I mean, I'm going with 1993's Body Melt.
Horror.
Oh, absolutely. One of my favorite horror films here in Australia.
Directed by Philip Rothie. It's just, what to say about this movie. I mean, I dare you to eat dinner and then watch it. Let's just put it like that. It's probably the most icky, fleshy, gross movie I've ever seen. And you know, like I think David Cronenberg would probably take his hat off to this film and say, like, I haven't put that much gore into
for it.
Yeah.
I top my scalp to you.
There's pretty much every single body part possible falls off at one point or another in this movie.
Or melts.
Or melts. But, you know, has kind of been talking about, like, you know, I guess kind of how Hannah and I love satire and love that kind of point where satire and horror meet. I can't think of another horror satire that's probably more savage than this, that goes as far with the idea as this one does. And like, it's not a ton of story. It's a very simple script. It's basically just pharmaceutical company is testing this drug on this small little kind of enclave cul-de-sac community straight out of like Ramsey Street neighbors, whatever, putting these little sachets of powder into people's mailboxes. And we basically just cut between the innocent civilians who are ingesting this and slowly starting to mutate over the course of the film, and the kind of like very arch bad guys who are like arguing amongst themselves, like we need to push through and persevere with the experiment, and then others being like, the cops are on us. It never explains why they are getting people to basically test something that is so far away from being ready to this is only going to lead back to them in some bad way. But I suppose you could argue, because it's a small little community, maybe no one will miss them, even though it is in Melbourne. Like, this isn't like the middle of nowhere. Like, if these people were doing this on the town in Wake and Fright, it might make a little more sense, but they're literally doing it in suburban Melbourne, but they don't give a shit. And that's the satire, right? It's just pharmaceutical companies don't give a fuck about us. They'll get away with it most of the time. And so, it's just got some incredible body horror, some incredible gore effects. And it's just a wild ride. It's really funny. It's ridiculously funny. It's kind of got like this chapter in the middle of it, which are like these two young guys, these two teens who basically go out on this road trip, and they break down in the middle of what I could only say is like The Family from The Hills Have Eyes, or like Texas Chainsaw 2 in the middle of the outback. And then you realize that like the dad from that family was one of the scientists who invented the thing in the first place, the serum or whatever. And they basically just, they're these like these mutant inbred family that like, if you took that section out of the film, you wouldn't miss it. Like it's just its own thing, but it's kind of like the best part of the film. So it's almost like, you mentioned how it's almost like an anthology of these separate stories, because none of the characters really overlap, with like the exception of a couple, but it's all just, they all are going through their like this one day from hell, basically caused by this one drug.
Yeah, I love this movie. I love the satirical bent to it. Brophy's a cultural critic as well, and he's a true mad genius. I think he's made some really great short and weird like film, not features, but like strange film work.
He's like a visual artist.
Artist,
like
true genius guy. I was lucky enough to host a screening with him of this film.
No way.
At the Brisbane Only Repulsive Liquid Film Festival a few years ago.
This film should be the mascot of that festival.
It really is. Like, it's got some of the most repulsive and exciting liquids of any film ever. But I had such a good time talking to him, because we're talking about so much about the satirical elements.
Yeah.
He really wanted this film to have like a clean look, like a commercial. And he was like, I want to make a satire on Australian television, Australian suburban culture, and Australian commercial television. Right. And so much of that comes from the cast as well. Like, you've got these people that are good, very, very good actors, but people that are very commercial television. You've got Andrew Daddo in here. You've got Ian Smith, aka Harold Bishop from Neighbours. You've got he plays the evil Dr. Carrera, and you've got Lisa McCune popping in. So many kind of familiar faces to that kind of style of Australian television, and it just works so beautifully. I think this is like the pick of the list for me so far. This is such a great film.
It's definitely one of one, and I think. Even though you could make this movie, say in the States or elsewhere, it's not about the outback. It's really just about kind of like the suburbs, and then, like an evil corporation. But the tone, I think, is distinctly from an Australian.
Yeah.
It's just very, I don't think Americans would let you make this movie, especially not in the 90s. Like, there is just something so demented about it, right? It's twisted, and it doesn't apologize. And it's just funny. Like, there have been gory horror films, but this is probably the goriest comedy I think maybe ever made.
Yeah, it would be up there.
It's right up there. I mean, I'm trying to think of something else on that level.
You see stuff you never see elsewhere. So I think it has to be on a technicality. It has to be.
That holds that comedic tone throughout. It's not just a horror film that has funny moments or dark humor. It is an all out comedy,
Yeah.
right? It's ridiculous. It's trying to gross you out, and it just keeps topping itself.
That is Body Melt by Philip Brophy, your pick from the 1990s. My pick from the 1990s, something I've talked about on this podcast before, so I probably won't go too far in depth with it. It's a 1993 film, horror anthology ghost story film called The Devil.
Horror.
By one of Australia's great visual artists and photography artist, Tracy Moffat. It's also the first feature film directed by an Australian Indigenous woman. It is 3 stories of the supernatural recounted in anthology format. One of them is about an Aboriginal boy living near a swamp who is haunted by an American GI who died in quicksand. Another one is about Ruby and her family who live in a house near a long abandoned train tracks which still carry ghostly trains that go across those tracks. And the third one is about a landlord who has trouble evicting the tenants of an old warehouse. And those tenants are a couple that have been dead for many, many years. I think this film, why I picked it and why I put it in here, it's one of those films that I remember hearing about for a long time. It was impossible to see. And they screened it as part of Australian female filmmakers retrospective at the art gallery during the Sydney Film Festival.
Oh, that's cool.
And I was so excited to finally be able to see this film on the big screen because it has this an interest to it that I think is unique, this visual and oral quality to it that's kind of unlike any other film. It uses both location and studio shooting and built sets and to really create these different feelings and different tones where everything feels quite hybrid in every way.
Yeah.
There's some parts that feel like documentary-esque. There are some parts that feel like you're watching a play that's been filmed.
Totally. Yeah.
And I think what it really does, it kind of creates this enmeshed quality to all of it. And it feels hybrid in many ways because, Tracy Moffat is this great artist who I think makes stuff with a universal quality. And like you can read this as an Indigenous film, but also it's like there's a mix between these stories that aren't quite like an Indigenous style of storytelling, except it kind of has this recounted culture of storytelling, like that kind of the oral history and like
kind
the
of like a
myth
myth
stories,
like a myth or like a ghost story that your grandparents told you that they heard from someone else.
Exactly,
it's just been passed down. Yeah.
So it has like both those qualities, like the more like European quality to it, but also more Indigenous quality to it. I think it's just a singular film. The only thing you can really compare it to, it has been compared to the Japanese horror ghost story anthology Quaidon. But I think what this does, this is a really funny film as well. Like there's so much great humor through performances, but also just through scripting and story, how each of them feel like a different kind of take on a ghost story as well. Even the delivery of them feels different. But I just think this is so lively, so interesting, and just a really, really beautiful film. Have you had a chance to catch up with this one?
I actually hadn't seen it until you told me about it, and I caught it on SBS On Demand.
Every time it's on there, I watch it because it might never be there ever again.
We're in the age of streaming. This is why I love physical media. And I did look up because it's not the best quality, the version on SBS. I don't think it had a credit at the end saying that it's been restored.
Yeah.
But SBS, it's a free network or whatever, so we're not going to be hard on them about the bit rate of their streaming. But it's still worth watching it that way. I can only imagine what it would be like in a cinema or when they do a Blu-ray of it.
Yes.
I will definitely be picking up the Blu-ray because it's so colorful. It felt to me like Wizard of Oz.
Yes.
Like it's almost like the closest Australian film to that aesthetic.
Yeah.
Exterior sets in sound studios, right? To where like they've painted the sky like green in that first short film, right? And they don't even try to hide the fact that like the ground doesn't, like it's just kind of like painted green for grass, or it's kind of like a brown matting. Like it's got a level of artifice to it.
Yeah.
But that is so beautiful, right? Like they embrace like matte paintings and I was watching it just being like, man, like the only other film I've seen that has done that, I mean, I'm sure a lot of them have done that, apart from the big, spectacle musicals like Wizard of Oz back in the day. They obviously had huge sound stages. But in terms of like smaller scale films, Toby Hooper did a movie called Eaten Alive, which is about more horror than this is probably more comedy. That's probably more straight horror, but it's about a guy who runs a little bed and breakfast, not Airbnb, a bed and back in the day before Airbnb, an actual bed and breakfast by a swamp. And you would pull in there, you stay at the hotel, and he'd basically feed you to alligator, to like his pet alligator. But they built the whole swamp and everything on a soundstage. So when you're watching it, it's got this like beautiful artifice about it, right? Like it's kind of like, it's just impossibly curated, like smoke kind of going everywhere. And he's able to kind of like control the night sky in a way because it's obviously fake. Yeah. And so there was something really cool about that. And he was very inspired by The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
And he just wanted to make like an outdoor film that you shoot in a studio.
Yeah.
Most filmmakers don't think to do that, because it's like, well, why wouldn't I just go outside? But if you want to embrace that completely, like if you want full control of the image, right, but you still want it to be set outdoors, for example, that's the way to do it. And it's kind of like a lost art these days.
Yeah.
So it was really cool to see an Australian film that has that full Australiana element, right? Like it's set out in the outback, or but to see that represented in the interior sets, I thought was really cool.
And
I'd never seen that before.
The only other film I'd compare that to is Paul Schrader's Mishima.
Oh, right, yeah.
Books, the stories within the story, he shoots those on sound stages.
That's
like
right.
Built sets and stuff like that. And even like the sonic nature of both these films, there's something in them that just connects those two films in my brain as well.
It totally makes sense that Tracy Moffat is a visual artist, because it's like she's doing it in a way where she can completely control all her kind of elements, like her paintbrushes or her photography, right?
Yeah.
And it does look like a lot of her photos. Like if you look at her famous photos, like they look like still frames from this movie.
Exactly.
You know?
I mean, it's interesting, the two films from the 90s, we picked both films that are like multidisciplinary artists doing something very different in the filmic space as well.
Really colorful primary colors, like bold colors,
Bold.
90s aesthetic.
Very 90s aesthetic on both of these films. We're going into the 2000s, which is, we're reaching the end of our list. We want to kind of cap things off before we get into that new wave of Australian horror that, like we said, really kicks off with Babadook and then continues on to stuff like Talk to Me, Bring Her Back, Sissy, like the new wave of Australian horror. So we're kind of looking at the films that I guess are like the precursors of a new wave.
Yeah.
Something that is building and brewing before it comes crashing. And what's your first pick here?
Well, this is a film that I feel very indebted to, and that is The Loved Ones by Sean Byrne, 2009.
Horror.
I don't know. I think we still make Sissy without this film, but I'm not so sure that it looks or feels the same. And I think what Hannah and I really fell in love with when we first saw this film is it's got the gore, but it's got a shit ton of glitter sprinkled all over it.
Yes.
It felt like the first time we'd seen like a glitter gore movie, right? And for me, out of all of these films, I mean, Wake in Fright is probably the film that is most personal to me in terms of my journey to filmmaking.
Yeah.
But The Loved Ones is probably the Australian horror film that probably is the closest to my heart in terms of like, if I could have made one of these films, this is probably the one that I would have made, or have been stoked to have been able to make. And I think it's just because it's so tongue in cheek, but still so demented.
Yes.
Right. Like it's got the savagery of something like a Wolf Creek, but it's funny. Now, some people could say Wolf Creek is funny and Mick Taylor, it's just, to me, that film doesn't really give you much sense of hope. It doesn't let you off the hook. And that's the point of it, right? It's trying to pass off as something that really happened, right? And in real life, the serial killer out in the outback, you probably don't have much hope. But this still plays in a bit of a fairy tale space, right? It's like this probably could happen, but it feels so twisted and heightened. It just straddles that fine line of plausibility and like the fantasy of film. And, obviously the idea of like a high school prom or a formal, but set in the killer's house where she can where her father helps her trap the boy that she wanted to take to the formal, and they can have their own little kind of school dance right there in the house with his feet nailed to the floor so he can't get anywhere. And there's just something so delicious about that idea. And then it just keeps elevating the concept, right? Like, I don't want to throw too many spoilers if you haven't seen it, but let's just say there's as in any, great horror villain's house, there's a basement.
Yes.
And there's a hell of a basement in this film. And yeah, so it's just a lot of fun. There's some great musical numbers in it. It's
got the greatest needle drop of all time, I reckon.
Yes.
With, Casey Chambers, Not Pretty Enough.
That's right.
I think
maybe the greatest needle drop in Australian film history.
I would probably say yes. I really think it's the best. I love this movie. So that great feeling of a John Hughes coming of age film meets
totally.
like Wolf Creek, Australian psychopath film.
Yes, like it gives people what they want from Australian films, from Australian horror films, which is that like meanness. But it's also got that very like Australian sense of humor, like what we're talking about with Body Melt a little bit, right? Like we just don't take any of it too seriously. It's not an earnest horror film at all.
Exactly, and it's got a great lead performance, Xavier Samuel, and I think I always think about this as this era film was Xavier Samuel could get your movie made.
Yeah, right. That was a wild time.
He was in one of the Twilight movies, became a bit of a star, and it's like all those and so many films got made because he was in them. A lot of great movies as well. He's got a great Australian filmography, Xavier Samuel.
It's kind of meta casting in that way because he was the pretty boy at the time, right? It's like if you did this today in Hollywood, it'd be like Timothy Chalamet, who's getting his feet nailed to the ground and tortured. Like, how much would you want to see that?
God, I'd love to give it a shot.
That's what's so good about this film. It's like it's the Australian version of that. Also, I want to give a shout out to John Brumpton, right, who plays the dad. Man, one of my favorite fathers in Australian horror.
I have to agree. And also the lead of the film, which
Robin.
is Robin McLeavy.
McLeavy, who did what happened to her career after this?
She doesn't appear in too much. So she appears in a few other things. She was recently in Force of Nature, the Drive 2, which I haven't seen.
And she was in Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. I don't know what role, but
this is...
She just kind of went off to the States.
One of the all-time great horror villain performances.
Totally. Because it's unexpected. Like maybe the father would have been expected, but it's the daughter, right? And he's working for her. Yeah. That's what's so great about it.
Absolutely. I adore this film. I love Sean Byrne, one of my favorite horror filmmakers as well. We just hung out with him the other day at his screening of Dangerous Animals, his new film.
That was the last time that I saw you, I think.
Yeah, I think so. But great movie.
And he's 3 for 3 for me in terms of like his middle film,
Devil's Candy.
The Devil's Candy was shot in the States, but all 3 of them are like different takes on serial killers, I suppose.
Yeah.
And this is probably the most unusual in that range. Like, I mean, if you look at Dangerous Animals, I really enjoyed it. For me, it's like Wolf Creek out at sea.
Yeah.
Psychopath who likes to toy with his victims, right? Kind of the man, and he's trapping these women who are kind of like his flies, right?
Yeah.
Who get trapped in the web. But like again, this is that, but with a twist.
Yeah.
Right. And I think for me, that's why it's still his best film. And honestly, like, I mean, maybe one of the most like Australian style horror films on this list, in that I don't think, even though it worked quite well internationally, and like Americans love this film, for example, it feels like it couldn't be made anywhere else.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
agree. My film from 2008, from the 2000s era, it's another film I really, really adore. This could be a number one on any list, really. This is Lake Mungo by director Joel Anderson.
Horror.
In 2008, Alice Palmer died. Her nightmares didn't. Great tagline as well. But I think this film, what it really does, I remember seeing it on DVD. Would have been probably like 2009 because I was working in a video store and we had it, and I had never really heard of it. Like it just was, it'd been out for a year. Just had not really heard of it at all. And then I just found it in our Australian film section. I go, cool, I like horror films. Let's see what this is about. And it really scared the absolute piss out of me.
It's terrifying.
And I think what it really does is it's a found footage horror film presented as a documentary. So more a faux documentary than a found footage film.
Yeah.
And why it holds so much power is it never breaks the confines of its style.
Yeah.
It never does anything outside of it. It always feels like a documentary. It never cheats its hand. It is presented so powerfully as a real document. And I love found footage horror. I'm of that exact age where it became like the horror mode. Obviously after Blair Witch Project, but more around this time with Paranormal Activity and stuff. And I think found footage is so key and essential to horror, going all the way back to fucking Dracula, the book. I consider a found footage because of the guy's diary and letters and stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
And it makes it, I think found footage is so key to capturing the fear of going, this is real.
Yeah.
This has actually happened. What you're witnessing is stuff from beyond your imagination, but it's all fucking real.
And I wish I had seen this when it first came out before anyone told me it was fake.
Yeah.
Just like I wish I'd been in that first weekend screening of the Blair Witch Project when people still thought they were tapes that got discovered. But with both of those films, even after knowing that they're fake or that they're contrived, to me, they're still, Blair Witch Project, to me, is still the scariest thing I've ever seen. Like, I still have it up there as the scariest film experience I've ever had. I think this is probably the scariest Australian film I've ever seen.
And it's because it's like a fear of grief. Exploration of grief that's so real. It's so creepy. And it's like, and because it feels real, it never stops feeling real. But it's like that, it's the death of a teenage girl and how it affects her family and the world around her as well.
Another Palmer girl.
Another Palmer girl.
A little nod.
I think, it has to be a nod, but Joel Anderson doesn't really talk about this film very much. No. I think that he also was a consultant for Late Night with the Devil, helped the Cairns brothers develop that film. And you can see so much of his idea of like the found footage being transported to that and the way the story is told.
But he's very like, he's been completely off the grid since this film came out.
And I hosted a screening of this at MIF last year, and for this new 4K restoration.
Wow.
So I didn't know how it would look, but it was transfixing.
It looks good. I saw it on what was it on Foxtel, I think. But it still looked great. I could tell it had been restored.
But it looks beautiful because it's like this digital artifice to it as well, because it's like different things you're seeing, because it's compiled. It's a documentary that's compiled from different footage, whether it be talking heads, old phone and home video footage and stuff.
A sex tape.
Exactly. So many different kind of forms of media come together.
All kinds of video. But that, I think, is what it's about. Like, I think, to me, apart from it just being a powerful narrative and a powerful presentation of essentially like a true crime story, right? That turns into a ghost story. Or is it, right? But what I took away from it, and I think why I returned to it, is this idea of how we record our lives, and if it's recorded, is it real? If it's not recorded, did it ever really happen? And there's this idea of in it where he goes for every way of recording an image. It's not just the interview footage. It's not just the phone footage, which is the creepiest. It's not just the sex tape that they discover. Spoilers. I won't give you any context. Hopefully that'll get more people watching.
Yeah,
what sex tape? I'm in. But also like the way the brother is into still photography and exposing in the darkroom and optical effects. And so it explores every kind of photographic medium that we have. And I actually saw in the credits that they shot on Kodak film. So I'm wondering what was on film. Was it the interview subject?
I think it must have been the interviews and the stuff that was the filmed documentary.
Yeah, right.
The way that it's compiled is the film was basically written a very detailed outline with no dialogue.
Right.
And so that what keeps all the talking heads feeling very real and fresh, because it is people doing a talking head how one would, where they're kind of prepared for it, but they're just talking. It feels so real because often they're kind of funny. Like you laugh at like the way that people talk in this, because it sounds like the way the Australians kind of talk with humor.
The boyfriend, how they're like, so why, like, you didn't know about that? And he's like, nah. If I knew about that, I wouldn't have dated her, would I?
Yeah,
and you're just like, is this an actor?
Yeah.
This feels so real.
And everyone feels real. They're all like actors that were not very big actors or anything at the time. Some of them have gone on to do some interesting work. But yeah, it's like I think it's just beautifully done. Like every aspect of it feels very real.
It's very
I'm
unique.
haunted by moments where the mother's reading from the diary
Oh, yeah.
entries and stuff, all
It's
these
fucked up.
letters. It's just so powerful. But seeing it
It's-
with the crowd,
Mm,
I
oh,
like
yeah,
seeing
yeah,
it with the crowd was a sensational experience because you could really feel the tension build. And
Yeah.
with this film, because it's not a found footage horror film in the traditional sense, it's a faux documentary. It's not like a traditional horror film in any kind of sense. We have like those reliefs of tension. The tension never gets relieved in this movie.
Yeah.
And there's a moment where nothing, I can't even tell you what happened in the film because it's just like nothing happened on screen. There was just a moment where there was a kind of a revelation and you could hear the whole audience make an audible noise. And it was like, oh my God, seeing this movie with an audience is unfucking believable.
That's so interesting because I would love to do that. I've never seen this or Blair Witch with an audience.
Oh gosh.
But I think what's so interesting about both of them is that they work both ways. Like my only experience of each of those films is watching them late at night at home in a dark room by myself. And they still work like that because you feel like you've discovered this artifact, this document, and there's something really creepy about that too.
Absolutely.
Especially the fact that a lot of the creepier shit, like Blair Witch, they're out in the woods, right? So you watch it at home and you're like, fuck, thank God I'm in the city. But you watch this film and a lot of the scariest shit is like setting up the cameras to film like their dark hallways at home at night and see if anything. And so I watched this at home. I remember when I watched this at home, I was lying in bed at night looking into the shadows in the corner of the room. And I hate that shit. This movie fucked me up. And so it's etched that little thing in my head. The only other thing that's fucking up as much is that one scene from Saw when the dummy comes out of the closet. I just kept seeing the dummy in the closet and the flash, and then the pig mask, whatever. But you know, Saw, it's like you're still hiding behind the artifice of a constructed narrative. This is so real. And the only other thing I would add to this film is, you know, like the fact that you can't just get online and watch an interview with the director.
Yeah.
Like he hasn't even made another film. It's creepier because it's like helped build this myth that maybe this film just came out of nowhere and like made itself, right? Like it was real. And I wonder, like, is he that committed to his art that he intentionally wants people to not know who made this movie?
Yeah.
How many filmmakers can you say have taken that approach?
Well,
I don't know if that's the real.
Yeah, but he's one of few, you know.
Because he said there's one line if you look him up, because I did some researching to try and find like who this guy is, like who made this incredible movie. And there's one line at the premiere where he said to some reporter, like, I just thought it would be cool if we all made something and 10 years time people would discover it and be like, I have no idea who the filmmakers are.
Yeah.
And it's like it just made itself. And that's what has ended up happening.
Yeah.
So my hat's off to Joel wherever he is that he stuck to it.
Yeah,
but
I think somewhere in Adelaide.
I hope we get another Joel Anderson film.
Oh God, I'd love it. I'd love it. Brilliant filmmaker, brilliant film, and a brilliant list from you and I.
Yeah.
I think we've done a really good job of unearthing some films. Hopefully, give you some good hidden gems. Films that are not always talked about when it comes to Australian horror, because we went back beyond the new wave to the cool shit. You picked Wake and Fright. I did Long Weekend, Next of Kin, Road Games, Body Melt, Bedevil, Loved Ones, and Lake Mungo.
I think a good mix of funny and scary.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's a good mix, and Australian style and like a universal approach to filmmaking as well.
Yeah.
There
What are
you
your
go.
honorable mentions, Bev?
Oh, look, too many to really go into, but I'll just run through some. A little more of a thriller, I suppose, than a horror. But if you did consider it, for my money, maybe one of the most perfect horror thrillers ever made in Australia, Dead Calm. Love Dead Calm.
Great film.
I really like the 2000 slasher film Cut. Have you ever
Me
seen
too.
Cut?
It's like Australia's closest answer to Scream.
Exactly. Very underrated. About
Kylie Minogue's in
Kylie
it.
Minogue, who's kind of doing, like, spoilers, but who's kind of doing the Drew Barrymore opening from the first Scream. Also about a film crew making a film that may or may not be cursed, and it came out 3 weeks before Scream 3.
Wow.
So there you go, which was also obviously set on a film set. You want me to just keep running through them?
Yeah, run them through. We'll do quickly.
Quickly, I had never seen Blackwater before, the crocodile flick. I actually realized that we didn't talk about any crocodile flicks.
Yeah, Dark Age was one of my ones I really love.
Dark Age, I think
is a masterpiece, really.
I think Dark Age takes the cake for the crocodile flicks.
Yeah.
I think it's our Jaws.
Yeah,
I mean,
I agree.
You even have like the boat of the three guys that are going down river to try to stop the croc,
exactly.
right?
I just think Dark Age is so good, underrated. I wish I'd picked it. Razorback was the other one I was thinking of, like a big Jaws thing, but I think Razorback, best looking movie ever made in Australia.
Yes,
but
hands
it's just
down.
not, and also the best premise going, it's Jaws with a big pig in a bush.
Yeah.
And then just watch it go, almost.
If you just want to have a fucking house party and throw something on that looks cool in the background, put Razorback on.
Mm-hmm.
Blackwater looks like shit when you start watching it. And you're just like, I put it on, I was like, I hate things that look like they were just shot on a handycam, but it really works for the film.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the way they pulled the movie off on a super low budget, not showing the croc, apparently no CGI. Maybe there's one shot in it, which I can't imagine how they did it without, but very, very well executed. What else? I mean, you know, special shout out to the Howling 3, the marsupials, especially because I'm a big Philippe Mora guy, Australian director. I really love The Beast Within.
Yeah.
And I love that Philippe Mora gets hired to go to America and make Howling 2, and then they keep him on for Howling 3. So he brings it back home to Australia and goes fucking kangaroo werewolves, you know, and there's an indigenous element. I feel like, would that get made today? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe there need to be a little more consultation about it, but it's so uniquely Australian as a creature feature.
It's a whack movie.
It's a whack movie. I can't even say it's good, but it's
best ballet horror movie this side of Suspiria and and Black Swan. I guess.
Good point.
Yeah.
I just I mean, look, it's not. There's definitely a step down in the creature effects from the first one, the Joe Dante film. It's kind of diminishing. It's diminishing returns from that. You know, it's not Robertine anymore, but it's still very, very cool. And then, I mean, the only other one I want to shout out, look, I'm obviously a slasher fan.
Yep.
We didn't really talk about many slashers. I don't really think of something like Wolf Creek as a slasher, even though I guess you could argue it, but they're not kill sequences one by one in that slasher format. There's kind of like this skin flick slasher film called Nightmares by John De Lamont from 1980.
Yeah.
Which, you know, is as perverse as it is entertaining. I just think it's cool. I just love anything that's kind of like it's set in a theater. You know, I think that's always a bit of fun. It's kind of got that metatextual kind of element going on. And, you know, John Lamont kind of came from erotic movies.
Yep.
They basically did a lot of these kind of like skin flicks, as you would call them. But it just
sex documentaries.
Sex documentaries. But this Nightmares had a nice restoration on Blu-ray. And I picked it up from free Radio Alice here in Darlinghurst, where I've discovered some great gems. So I just wanted to give that a little shout out, just in terms of little known Aussie slashers.
Yeah, good call. I really want to shout out a couple of other ones from that could have made the list. Picnic at Hanging Rock, of course.
Yeah, classic.
But, you know, that's not an underrated or underseen.
If you're listening to this and you haven't heard about that, then it's probably not the right podcast for you. But.
And exactly. Celia, I love. I talked about it on an episode recently with Mish Wittrup. And The Tunnel for another found footage film.
Yeah.
Tunnel scared the shit out of me when I first saw it. Really appreciate it. And then the kind of other stuff were stuff that are in that new wave now. Obviously, the Babadook and Talk to Me, Bring Her Back, I think are all brilliant. But Late Night with the Devil, I also adore. The other stuff that I really love is You Won't Be Alone by Goran.
Beautiful.
Who's also an alumni of the Last Video Store. And Relic. I think Relic is so scary.
I really like Relic.
Relic, I just really, really love. And T-Blockers and Carnage with Christmas by Alice Mayer Mackey. I kind of talked about a lot of those, and I interviewed actually all those filmmakers on a podcast I did called Sunburnt Screens about Australian cinema. I'll link it in the show notes as well. You can listen to that. But I did a 2-part about that new wave of Australian horror. Yeah. So that if you want to hear me talking more about that new wave stuff, go to that 2-parter.
And look, I mean, like bringing it full circle, like you don't get to Bird Eater without Wake and Fright, right?
Yes.
And so that's from all the way from 1971 to today. And so I think Australian horror is alive and well. And also just quickly talking about prosthetics in Relic. We don't get the gore in Sissy without Relic because we saw that Larry Van Dijnhoven did those like skin effects,
Yeah.
like when and we were like, who the fuck did that?
Yeah.
We found that guy, and he was one of our first hires. So there
Far
you
out.
go.
Well, I'm going to give another shout out to Sissy as well. Sissy on Blu-ray, pick it up. Your film, and I would say has some of the best gore I've ever seen in an Australian horror film.
Oh man,
There's a head crunch in this movie like none I've ever seen in my life that I absolutely adore. I think about it when I shut my eyes all the time.
It's a bit silly.
It's so fun. But Sissy, you can watch it as well. Where can people watch it?
Well, you can watch it on Shudder in Australia, but I think our streaming term is coming to an end next year, so it'll be interesting to see where it's available. You can obviously rent it everywhere, iTunes and stuff, and then you can buy the Blu-ray from Vinegar Syndrome in the States, and we're
you
working.
can import it to Australia.
You can import it if you've got an all-region. You paid the big bucks like us tragics do, spending way too much on
how we got our imported players for a long time.
Seriously, like physical media is like my largest line item when it comes to tax time every year.
Yeah.
But we're also working on getting Blu-ray released here in Australia soon. So
beautiful. Good to hear it.
Yeah.
Well, Kane, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast
Thanks
today.
for having me, man. This was a lot of fun.
This was so good. I'm glad we got to put a big list together like this.
Yeah, I'll come back anytime. Let's do it.
You will come back anytime. I'm going to invite you back pretty
I'll
often.
bring Hannah
now,
next
I reckon.
time. I'll bring Hannah.
Please.
Yeah.
But guys, thank you so much for listening or watching The Last Video Store. You can follow us on Last Video Store Batuta on Instagram. And if you want your own custom recommendations based on your taste, hit us up within the reviews on iTunes or on YouTube or Spotify with what your rental combo would be. A new release, 2 weeklies, and then I'll give you a recommendation based on that. But until then, keep watching movies, baby, and keep getting freaked out by horror cinema.
Or having a lot of laughs at the same time.
Exactly. And let us know what you think of this list, what you think should have been on the list, if we missed anything, if anything you think should have been uncovered, or, holy shit, if you think there's a horror movie that we don't know about in Australia, absolutely send that in to us. We'd love to see it.
The Last Video Store.